Spring, 1943. 20,000 feet above occupied Europe, the air belonged to the Luftwaffe. American bombers moved through it anyway, slow, heavy, and exposed. Long aluminum formations stretched across the sky like floating cities, each aircraft locked into position by doctrine, discipline, and fear. The men inside them knew the numbers. If 100 bombers crossed the channel, a dozen would not come back. Some days more. Flak burst beneath them in neat black grids. Fighters waited above, hidden in the sun, patient and disciplined. When they attacked, they did so with mathematics, not emotion, angles, closure rates, blind spots. Once a bomber drifted out of formation, it was no longer a machine. It was prey. The manuals were explicit. Hold course. Hold speed. Never maneuver violently at altitude. A heavy bomber was not built to fight like a fighter. Roll too hard, dive too steep, and the wings would shear away. The aircraft would disintegrate, and everyone aboard would die. That belief killed men. On April 7, 1943, Captain Robert Harper learned that belief was incomplete. Harper was 24 years old, raised in rural Pennsylvania, the son of a crop duster pilot who flew an aging biplane low over cornfields and barns. Before Robert learned to drive, he learned how wind moved across wings. Crop dusting taught lessons no flight manual could. How an aircraft spoke through vibration, how much pressure meant too much, how thin the line was between control and catastrophe. When he joined the Army Air Forces, instructors noticed his smooth hands and quiet confidence. He transitioned to the B-17 Flying Fortress, a four-engine bomber designed for endurance and stability, not agility. 10 men, thin aluminum skin, fuel tanks, and bombs packed inside. Officially, it could not roll aggressively. Officially, it could not dive steeply without structural failure. Harper read the manuals. Then he read the engineering reports. He asked mechanics about wing spars, load tolerances, safety margins. He sketched diagrams in a small notebook, roll rates, dive angles, stress distribution. He wasn't looking for heroics. He was looking for truth. By early April, his crew, call sign Baker 27, had flown multiple missions. They were steady, professional, survivors. On paper, unremarkable. The target that morning was a submarine pin on the French coast. Weather was clear. Intelligence predicted moderate flak and possible fighter interception. A textbook mission. At 0600, Baker 27 lifted from its English airfield and joined the formation. 18 bombers tightened into a box at altitude. The channel slid beneath them, gray and calm. Gunners test-fired short bursts, tracers vanishing into the sea. They crossed the coast at 22,000 feet. Flak began almost immediately. Black bursts walked toward the formation with mechanical precision. The bomb bay doors opened. The aircraft slowed, heavy and committed. That was when the fighters came. Not head-on. Not from above. From the sun. 6 Messerschmitt Bf-109s dove in a shallow attack, targeting the rear of the formation. Tracer fires streaked across the sky. Harper felt the bomber shudder as cannon shells stitched across the right wing. Hydraulic pressure dropped instantly. Engine 3 coughed, sputtered, then died. Harper feathered the propeller without hesitation, but the damage was done. Baker 27 sagged. The formation moved ahead, unable to slow. Within seconds, Harper's aircraft was alone. The fighters circled. This was the moment doctrine said death was inevitable. Another pass came from low 6 o'clock. Cannon rounds tore through the tail section. The tail gunner's voice cut off mid-sentence. Silence replaced it. The engineer reported more damage, rudder control sluggish, oxygen lines severed in the waist. Then another burst hit. The radio operator collapsed at his desk, blood spreading across charts and code sheets. 4 fighters remained. They were patient now. They had time. Harper scanned the sky. No escorts. No friendly fighters. The coast was minutes away, but minutes were too long. The enemy was reorganizing for a coordinated kill. He understood their geometry. 3 would attack from high, forcing the gunners upward. 3 would come in low, through the distraction. It was flawless. Unless the bomber stopped behaving like a bomber. Harper rested his hand on the control column and felt the aircraft. The vibration. The airspeed. The wings still speaking, still intact. He nudged the nose forward, just enough to test. The bomber responded. His co-pilot looked at him, confused. Harper told him to tighten his harness. Then he spoke to the crew. Secure everything. Brace for maneuver. No explanation. There was no time. The fighters committed. Harper shoved the control column forward with force. The nose dropped violently. The horizon disappeared. The altimeter unwound. 22,000. 20,000. 18,000. The airspeed needle surged past redline. The wings groaned. Then Harper rolled full aileron. The B-17 inverted. For a fraction of a second, they hung weightless. Then gravity took over, and the bomber fell like a stone. The German fighters overshot, every one of them. They had attacked a target that no longer existed where it was supposed to be. Harper counted the seconds. 3. Then he began to pull out. The bomber was still diving when Harper began the pullout. Not a yank. Not panic. A measured, deliberate pressure on the control column, increasing by inches, letting the aircraft bleed speed before asking the wings to carry weight again. The G-forces built steadily. The cockpit creaked. Metal complained in long, aching sounds that traveled through the floor and up into Harper's spine. 9,000 feet. 8. His vision narrowed at the edges, gray creeping inward, but he held the pressure constant. Too fast, and the wings would tear free. Too slow, and the bomber would pancake into the air beneath it. The co-pilot grunted, straining against the harness. Somewhere aft, loose equipment slammed into bulkheads. The remaining engines roared unevenly, fighting drag and damage. Then the dive flattened. The B-17 leveled out at just over 8,000 feet. Low, fast, and intact. Harper eased the power forward. The aircraft steadied. The shaking subsided into a rough but manageable vibration. Above them, the German fighters circled in confusion. They had committed to a geometry that no longer applied. By the time they rolled and tried to reacquire the bomber, Baker 27 was already pulling away, low and fast, angling toward the channel. The fighters hesitated. Fuel mattered. Risk mattered. A lone bomber that refused to behave like a bomber was no longer a clean kill. They broke off. Harper didn't celebrate. He checked instruments. 3 engines still running, 1 rough. Airspeed acceptable. Control authority degraded but functional. He keyed the intercom. Damage reports. Responses came back, shaken but alive. The tail gunner was gone. The radio operator unconscious, breathing. Hydraulics partially failed. Oxygen compromised aft. They were wounded, but they were flying. The co-pilot stared at Harper, disbelief plain on his face. How did you know the wings would hold? Harper answered without looking over. I didn't. Not for certain. But I knew where they wouldn't fail, at that speed, with that pull-out rate. He had read the numbers. He had felt the aircraft. He had trusted the margin most men were taught to fear. They crossed the channel in silence. England appeared beneath them, green and calm, absurdly peaceful after the violence above France. Harper brought Baker 27 down smoothly, the landing gear locking with a jolt that felt almost gentle by comparison. The bomber rolled to a stop, surrounded by ground crews. Men stared at the shredded tail, the ruptured fuselage, the black streaks where cannon shells had passed inches from fuel tanks. Harper shut down the engines and sat for a moment with his hands resting on the control column. Then he reached into his jacket and took out the small notebook. He wrote everything down. The debriefing that followed was tense. Intelligence officers listened carefully as Harper described the engagement. 6 fighters, attack geometry, inversion, dive angle, pull-out speed. They asked him to repeat the sequence. He did, precisely. They asked if he had been trained to invert a flying fortress. He said no. They asked if he understood the maneuver violated operational doctrine. He said yes. The squadron commander, older and cautious, spoke next. He said Harper had endangered his crew, that the aircraft could have disintegrated. That luck, not skill, had brought them home. Harper didn't argue. He only said that staying straight and level would have killed them all. When pressed, he explained the math. Load factors, structural margins, fighter overshoot windows. He spoke calmly, without bravado, citing engineering data and experience. The room went quiet. This wasn't recklessness. It was analysis. Still, the verdict was clear. The maneuver would not be authorized. It would not be taught. It would not appear in any manual. Doctrine existed for a reason. If every pilot improvised, formations would collapse. Chaos would follow. The war would be lost. Harper accepted the order. He kept the notebook. In the weeks that followed, rumors spread. A bomber had inverted and lived. 6 fighters overshot. A crippled fortress escaped. Some dismissed it as myth. Others leaned in closer. A few pilots, quiet ones, asked Harper questions. He showed them the performance charts. He explained the risks. He never encouraged imitation. He only shared information. Some tested pieces of it. Steeper dives. Sharper banks. Unpredictable timing. Not inversion, but deviation. Losses in Harper's squadron dropped slightly. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. An engineering team arrived from right field. They interviewed Harper, reviewed his notes, inspected returned aircraft. Stress tests confirmed what Harper had suspected. The B-17 was stronger than its manuals claimed. Over-engineered. Conservative. Built with margins no one advertised. But the margins were thin. The difference between survival and structural failure measured in seconds and judgment. The engineers recommended no doctrinal change. Too risky. Too dependent on individual skill. Harper understood. Institutions do not change because one man survives. They change slowly, quietly, through accumulated anomalies that can no longer be ignored. Harper flies 35 missions and survives his tour. He receives a Distinguished Flying Cross. The citation mentions courage, not inversion. After the war, he becomes a flight instructor. He teaches one lesson over and over. Listen to the aircraft, know what it can really do, and understand when the book no longer applies. He never becomes famous. His story fades into logs and memories. But engineers later confirm what Harper felt in the controls. The B-17 was stronger than doctrine allowed pilots to believe. 15 seconds didn't change the war. But 15 seconds saved a crew and quietly proved that survival is sometimes found just beyond the edge of permission. Not recklessness, competence, and the refusal to accept that death is inevitable simply because the manual says so.